Hey, everybody, and welcome back to English Podcast Adventures. I'm Michael, and today we're going on a deep dive.
Yeah, always fun.
Absolutely. And today we're looking at 10 words that a few of you listeners sent our way.
Yeah.
And these are words that we thought would really help you sound more fluent and confident in your English.
Mm-hmm.
And, especially if you're thinking about doing something like the IELTS exam. But
Yeah.
even if not, it's always good to kind of expand your vocabulary.
Yeah, exactly.
More tools in the toolbox.
Absolutely. So we're going to break down each of these words, look at some definitions, some examples, and hopefully kind of uncover some interesting things about these words along the way.
What's fascinating about vocabulary is that it's not just about knowing definitions. It's about understanding all these subtle ways that words work together to create meaning.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point to start with, because sometimes it can feel like, oh my God, I got to memorize all these words.
Right.
But actually, it's more about how they work together, right?
It is. Yeah. Okay, so let's dive into our first word, which is obsolete.
Okay.
And the definition we have here says, no longer produced or used, out of date. Okay, so pretty straightforward. Seems like, it's just like an old thing. But I bet there's more to it than that.
Absolutely. Obsolete is more than just old. It implies that something has been replaced by something better, more efficient, or more relevant to our current needs.
Right, so it's not just that it's old, it's that it's been, superseded.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, great.
So think about the way technology changes so rapidly. What's cutting edge today might be obsolete tomorrow.
Yeah, and I think a really good example of that are, those old computers?
Right.
With the floppy disks?
Yeah.
They're almost comical now, but at one point that was the height of technology.
State of the art.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the example sentence that we have here is, the use of floppy disks has become obsolete in modern technology.
Yeah, I love it. It highlights that shift so perfectly.
Yeah, and it's not just about technology. I think it's about, almost every part of our life, job skills even.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The skills that were essential for a certain job, maybe even a couple of decades ago,
right,
might be completely obsolete now.
Yeah, because of automation, because of changes in the industry.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
So it's not just a word, it's like a whole
concept.
Yeah, it's like a whole concept.
Yeah.
Okay, so on to a word that seems like maybe the opposite of obsolete, which is ubiquitous.
Okay.
Which means present appearing or found everywhere. And I feel like this is maybe one that is especially relevant now in our digital age.
It absolutely is ubiquitous. Describe something that's become so widespread, it's almost impossible to avoid.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
It really is. And I think smartphones are a perfect example.
Yeah.
And we even have an example sentence that supports that smartphones have become ubiquitous in today's society.
And it's true. It's can you imagine life without a smartphone now?
Yeah, it's hard to imagine.
Yeah. So that is a really, really good example, I think. But it's not always, a physical object.
Oh, for sure.
Ideas can be ubiquitous.
Yeah, trends, anxieties can be ubiquitous if they're widespread and influential.
Yeah, so it's almost like anything that's really, really common can be described as ubiquitous.
Right, and think about the concept of globalization or the spread of certain political ideologies. These things can be ubiquitous even though you can't physically touch them.
Right, so they're everywhere, but they're not,
Right.
They're not a thing.
Right.
They're more of a concept.
Exactly.
That's really interesting. I never really thought about it that way.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So moving on, let's talk about alleviate.
Okay.
Which means to make something bad, such as pain or problems, less severe. So I feel like this is a word that we use when we're talking about problems or challenges.
It is alleviate suggests making something more bearable even if you can't eliminate the problem entirely.
So you're not getting rid of it, you're just making it a little bit
less intense, less severe.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Our example sentences. The new policies aim to alleviate poverty in urban areas. So the policies might not eradicate poverty entirely, but they're designed to improve the situation.
Right. So it's we're trying to make it a little bit better.
Exactly.
And that makes me think of things like even pain relief medication.
Yeah. That's a great example.
Or strategies for reducing stress.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not getting rid of the stress, but it's alleviating it.
Right.
Okay, cool.
So alleviate implies you're making a conscious effort to lessen the severity of something negative.
Right. And I think, to really highlight this point, like, we have to think about, like, okay, what are some other words we could use? Like, reduce, lessen, minimize.
Danish.
Yeah, all these words kind of have a similar meaning, but alleviate really has that sense of, like, we're specifically trying to make something bad.
Less bad.
Less
Yeah.
bad. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to a word that I think describes a lot of our listeners, which is meticulous.
Okay.
Which means showing great attention to detail, very careful and precise.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this is somebody who's a perfectionist.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say in the best possible way, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, meticulous definitely suggests a high level of care and precision.
Yeah.
It's often used to describe people who are very, very skilled in their work, whether it's a surgeon performing an operation or an artist creating a very detailed masterpiece.
Yeah, and it could also be, someone who's just really good at organizing things like their workspace,
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
which our example sentence talks about. She is always meticulous when it comes to organizing her workspace.
I love that. And that really gets to the core of that word.
Yeah, I think so too, but there's like a subtlety to meticulous that I think makes it different from words like
thorough or careful.
Yeah.
You're right. There's a subtlety there that makes it different. It implies a real passion for detail, almost an obsession with getting things exactly right.
It's like they love it.
They love it.
They love being meticulous.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a key distinction, especially if you're, using this word in like the IELTS exam.
For sure. You want to make sure you're choosing the word that most accurately reflects what you want to say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so our next word is ambiguous.
Yeah, right.
And this means open to more than one interpretation, not having one obvious meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And this seems like a word that could cause a lot of problems.
It definitely can. Ambiguity in language can lead to misunderstandings, misinterpretations, and all sorts of communication breakdowns.
Yeah, for sure.
It really can. And we have a perfect example sentence for this. The instructions were so ambiguous that no one knew what to do.
Oh, we've all been there, right?
We've all been there.
Like you get these instructions and you're like, what?
What's going on?
Yeah, exactly.
That's ambiguity in action.
And I think particularly for those of you who are thinking about the IELTS,
Yes.
this is a word that you really need to understand because often they'll give you texts or audio where the meaning is ambiguous on purpose.
It's a test. It's a test of your ability to recognize ambiguity and understand its implications.
Right. So it's not just about like understanding what the words mean. It's also about understanding
how they can be interpreted in different ways.
Right.
Yeah. And that is a crucial skill for success in exams like the IELTS.
Yeah, because you might see, one sentence, but it could have 2 or 3 different interpretations.
Absolutely. And you have to be able to recognize that.
Yeah. And I think being aware of that ambiguity is really important.
For sure. Yeah.
Okay. So moving on to our next word, which is plausible.
Okay.
And this means seeming reasonable or probable.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this is a word that is all about logic and evidence.
It is plausible. Describe something that sounds believable, even if you don't have absolute proof.
So it's like, it could be true.
Right.
But we don't know for sure.
Exactly. It's about whether something makes sense based on the available information. We have a good example sentence here. His explanation for being late sounded plausible, so the teacher didn't question it further.
It's like, it sounds believable enough.
Right.
To not question it.
Exactly. And, in contexts like the IELTS, you might be asked to evaluate the plausibility of an argument or a claim.
Right. So you have to look at, okay.
Does this hold water? Does it make sense?
Does it make sense?
Given what we know.
Given the information that we have.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So our next word is imminent.
Okay.
Which means about to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a word that kind of gives me a sense of anticipation, like something's
on the verge of happening.
Yeah, it's about to happen.
Yeah.
The example sentence we have here is, the dark clouds signaled that a storm was imminent.
I love that example. You can almost feel the storm brewing.
You can feel it, yeah.
Yeah, that's the power of that word, imminent.
Yeah, it's like it's going to happen like right now.
Yes.
And, thinking about the IELTS again, you might see this word used when they're talking about like predictions or warnings.
Upcoming events, things of that nature.
Yeah, like an imminent economic crisis.
Exactly.
Yeah, or something like that.
Right, adds that sense of urgency.
Urgency, yeah.
Yeah.
It's about to happen.
It's coming.
Okay, cool. So our next word is eloquent,
which means fluent or persuasive in speaking or writing. So this is like a word that you would use to describe someone who is just a really good communicator.
They are. They're a master communicator. Eloquent suggests a skillful and artful use of language. It's about expressing yourself clearly, persuasively, and often beautifully.
It's like they make you want to listen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the example sentence we have here is, the speaker gave an eloquent speech that moved the audience to tears.
That's the power of eloquence.
Yeah, it's like they're so good at speaking that you're completely captivated.
Absolutely. And, thinking about the IELTS again, eloquence is a highly valued skill in both the speaking and writing sections.
Yeah, because you're being judged on your ability to communicate effectively, right?
Right. So the more eloquent you can be in your responses, the better your score is likely to be.
Yeah, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so 2 more words to go.
Almost there.
Our next word is scrutinize,
Okay.
which means to examine or inspect closely and thoroughly.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this is a word that really implies like you're paying attention to detail.
You're really digging deep.
You're really digging deep, yeah.
Scrutinize implies a very close and critical examination, often with the goal of finding flaws, inconsistencies, or hidden details.
So you're looking for problems.
Yeah, you're looking for anything that might not be quite right.
Okay, so the example sentence we have is, the lawyers scrutinize the contract before signing it.
Makes sense. You don't want to miss any crucial detail in a legal document.
Exactly.
Right.
And in the IELTS, you're often given quite a lot of information.
Lots of information.
And you need to really scrutinize it.
Absolutely. You need to scrutinize the text, the data, to extract key information, to analyze the arguments, to understand subtle nuances. It's all about looking beyond the surface and really digging into the details.
And that's a skill that you can apply to like pretty much every part of your life, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Not just exams.
No, not at all.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So our last word for today's deep dive is ostentatious.
All right.
And this means characterized by vulgar or pretentious display, designed to impress or attract notice.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this is like a word that's almost like a little bit negative.
Yeah, it can be. It definitely suggests a desire to stand out and be noticed often through displays of wealth status or possessions.
It's like trying too hard.
Yeah, a little bit over the top sometimes.
That's showing off.
Exactly.
Right.
Our example sentence is, he bought an ostentatious sports car to show off his wealth. It's about making a statement, sometimes a very loud one.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be about wealth. I guess it could be about anything where you're trying to like impress people.
Anything that's overly showy, extravagant.
Right, yeah. And I can see how this word could be used to like critique things like consumer culture.
Oh, yeah.
Like people buying
The latest gadgets, the biggest houses.
yeah, exactly.
It definitely has a place in those kinds of discussions.
Yeah, okay, cool. So we covered a lot of ground today.
We did. We started with obsolete floppy disks, and now we're talking about ostentatious sports cars.
Yeah, and I think, what's been really interesting about this is that it's not just about, like, knowing what the words mean. It's about being able to
Use them
and understand the nuances. Yeah,
what they imply.
exactly. So, yeah, hopefully this has been helpful for you all.
And remember, language is a living thing. It's constantly evolving. New words are being added. Old words are taking on new meanings, so stay curious. Keep exploring and never stop learning.
And hey, if you enjoyed this deep dive, hit that like button and subscribe to English Podcast Adventures.
Yes.
For more awesome English learning content. We've got tons of videos with tips and tricks and fascinating facts about the English language.
Yeah.
Until next time, happy learning.
Happy learning.